let's see, I'm going to talk about how we launch rockets. There's a huge misconception about how we end up launching a rocket. I think for the main part, people say, hey, we have a launch date. It must have just been like, oh, you guys have been working on it for a couple weeks? We have a launch date, we're going to launch it. That is so far from the truth. We work on rockets sometimes up to 10 years before we even get to our launch date. So I'm going to kind of tell you about some funny stories and tell you some of the things that we've done in our program. And I'm really just to kind of open your eyes to that whole process so that when you go back and someone's like, oh, NASA can never launch a rocket, they're always behind schedule. You can be like, well, actually, it takes a lot of effort to get to launch. So you're going to sound super smart in front of all these people. So, next slide. That's one of the cool graphics one of our people did. I like it. I stole it from them. All right, so this is me. My name is Patrick Renna. Is it okay if I sit down? All right, thank you. So my name is Patrick Renna. I'm a launch operations manager in the launch services program, a lot of launches. So we are the launch services program for NASA. We're based at Kennedy Space Center. What our program does is we are responsible for all the scientific and uncrewed missions that NASA sends out into space. So if you guys who's ever heard of like a Mars lunar rover or Mars rover? Yeah, that was us. So we didn't necessarily build the rover, but we're the ones who put it on Mars. All right, so a little bit about myself. One of my main job duties is that I'm responsible for something called a mission dress rehearsal. For any of those, we have any teachers in the room? Obviously one, you'll appreciate this. So one of my main things is I get to give a test to a bunch of rocket scientists. So the mission dress rehearsal is a final test before we get into actually launching a rocket. And what I do is I give everyone a test. I put them on their day of launch consoles. We all sit down. They have data flowing. They're looking at all their specific discipline systems, and I just mess with all of them. I start taking down systems. I start adding pressures that are not supposed to be there. I start adding lightning criteria. I start saying there's a hurricane off the side, and I try to see what they're going to do. It's about testing the response of how to deal with an anomaly that's not supposed to be there. And the whole point of this is to really train the team of how to deal with anomaly resolutions. How are we going to deal with something that's unexpected on day of launch? Because a lot of our missions, we have one chance to launch. Some of our missions we have a couple days, sometimes we have a couple months, but every time we don't make our launch date, it's costing people money, it's costing people time. So we want to make sure that if for some reason we don't launch that day, it's not because the crew wasn't properly trained. So one of my big job responsibilities is to make sure the crew is trained. I had the funny one out there that I banged my head on the desk because I'm also in charge of telling people where they sit for launch. Who here has ever planned a wedding before? Seating, you can't sit Uncle Ned next to Aunt Nancy because they hate each other. Same thing happens at NASA. There are people who don't like sitting next to one another. That person chews too loud. That person doesn't wear deodorant. I can't sit there. That person's not my discipline. I have to deal with anything. Headquarters is like, oh, we're sending a congressional delegation down because they want to see a launch. We got to find some place for them to sit. It is so far out of the realm of what I do, but it ends up taking so much time out of my daily schedule to just deal with all the requests that come from seating. So that's why I always put it up there, because it's funny. It has nothing to do with science, nothing to do with engineering. It has everything to do with people wanting a really nice seat for launch. And then half the time, we'll slip a day or two because of weather, and they're just like, oh, I'm going on a cruise, I'm not going to make it anyway. And that's when my head bangs on the desk. So I also do a lot with Fleet Insight. I do a lot of making sure, so what we do with the launch services program is that I said we have commercial rockets that we buy from commercial companies. So does anyone know of a rocket out there or a rocket company out there? Everyone knows SpaceX. SpaceX, great. Anyone? ULA? No one knows ULA, that's great. Blue Origin? Anyone else? I'm sorry, what? Oh, okay, I just like calling on people. This is a big participation, huge participation. You should be not sitting in the front row if you don't like to be called on. So, Blue Origin, Northrop Grumman, SpaceX. Oh, what's up? Moog? Okay, yes, that's true.
Lockheed Martin.
Lockheed Martin, yes. Boeing. So, Boeing and Lockheed Martin married each other years and years ago and formed a company called United Launch Alliance. Boeing had a rocket, Lockheed had a rocket, and they're like, why are we competing against each other? How about we just form a company and just offer all our services to the government? So you're both right, but technically a little bit more right over here. That's why he's a star pupil in the front seat. So what we do, unlike some of our other NASA programs like Artemis, anyone heard of Artemis, the SLS program? So that is a NASA-built rocket, NASA-engineered rocket. No, you're good. I got you. That she knows. She doesn't know SpaceX, but she knows Artemis. That's great. I love it. So that is a NASA-built rocket, NASA-designed rocket, NASA-processed rocket. We do all the maintenance on that rocket. It takes time and money to get through the government. And so the Artemis program is a little bit slower moving because it's all government funded and all government operated. What we do with the Launch Services program is I say, SpaceX is going to go build us a rocket, I'll buy a rocket. You maintain it, you build it, you do all that other stuff. When I need it, I'll let you know. And that's what we do with United Launch Alliance, what we do with Northrop Grumman, that's what we do with everybody else. So what we do is we come out with a great, we'll have a great satellite that says, hey, I want to take this satellite to the sun. And we'll work all the requirements of what it's going to take for us to go to the sun. And then what we do as a program is we go out and say, hey, if you have a rocket out there, what are you going to charge me to go to the sun? And then Northrop Grumman will put out an offer, SpaceX will put out an offer, United Launch Alliance will put out an offer, all these companies will put out an offer, and then we'll go through everything and say, you're the best deal for the government. So why that's important is because it allows us to move at a lot faster pace. It allows us to have less overhead because we're not the ones maintaining the fleet of vehicles. But within that fleet insight that we're looking for is that everyone launches a SpaceX rocket. Whether you have, anyone heard of Starlink, the internet Starlink that SpaceX put up? Yeah. So they have Starlink missions. They have missions that they launch for the Department of Defense. They have launches that they send up for foreign governments like Turkmenistan, satellites. And so we'll monitor all those launches on top of ours because we want what's called fleet insight. So if something happens on a mission that is not ours, like, oh, we lost an engine during flight, well, I'm the next one who's flying on one of my NASA missions with a billion-dollar payload. I want to know what happened on that mission. So even though we don't launch every single mission with SpaceX, we're following along with every single thing that SpaceX does. We're following along every little thing that United Launch Alliance does, every little thing that Northrop Grumman does, in order to provide a better insight into the launch vehicle for our government customer whenever they want to put up a billion-dollar spacecraft somewhere. And so when I say spacecraft, I mean satellite, spacecraft. In my world, they're very hand-in-hand, so if I get confused terminology there, just what does that mean? I'll help you out. Launch vehicles are rockets. Rockets launch vehicles. Same thing. So how I got to where I'm at right now is a very, very long story. I was going to go in the Army after I graduated college. I was going through all my medical testing, and NASA calls me up and says, hey, do you want to go work on the space shuttle? And I'm like, what are you guys paying? I'm kind of curious. And so I had to compare both the salaries, and NASA doesn't pay a little bit better than the Army, so I ended up going work on the space shuttle. And it has not been a bad day of work ever since, I'm not going to lie. But I started working my career on the space shuttle. That program eventually did retire, and I ended up working for the range safety program. The range safety program dealt with a lot of the DoD missions and a lot of DoD ranges, which is where we launched something from. And all of a sudden that was called a range safety officer. So what my job was during that time period is that I would have my finger on the button to blow up a rocket should it go off course. That was a fun job. How I got into that job, can't tell you, got lucky. But I was responsible for making sure that that rocket went off course for whatever reason, I would blow it up. No, I never got to blow up a rocket, unfortunately. But that is a very, very high stressful job. So somehow the stress of that job got me into the job that I'm right now as a launch operations manager, where I help process and integrate and train all the teams for day of launch responsibilities for all our missions. Oh, I also went to school a bunch. Kind of like school. It was a very fun time for me. I got a bunch of degrees. They were all fun degrees. Can we go to the next slide? So I'll talk to you a little bit about a recent mission that I just did. It's called PACE. Stands for Plankton what? Plankton, can we read? Plankton aerosol.
Cloud ocean ecosystem?
Ecosystem. Great job. So, because I don't want to say that mouthful every single time at NASA, we just use acronyms, so we just call it PACE. PACE was a very interesting mission, especially for folks that lived in Florida, because it dealt with looking at the plankton levels outside on the beaches, on the estuaries, and the rivers. And why plankton ended up being important was because plankton affected the ecosystem of not only the ocean, but of the cloud layers above it. So we decided to send up a satellite up there to start measuring the different levels, both within the ecosystem above the water and below the water. So anyone from Florida, everyone been to Florida? Good times? Yeah, good times. So we have something out there called red tide. Red tide, you do not want to go in the ocean when there's a red tide. So when this mission came up, I kind of wanted to attach myself to it because I surf, I'm in the water all the time. I wanted to make sure that I am not going to get sick when I go in the water. So this was a very interesting mission. This mission, I think, lasted about 5 years from when we started design on it to about when we launched. It was about a 5-year process. My specific portion of it, I came on about 1.5 to 2 years. I'm in the launch operations phase. So those first couple of years are just spacecraft design. What are we trying to achieve? And once they get to a very mature rate, we're like, okay, now let's find you a rocket. I talked before about putting out, recommendations for who wants to bid on a rocket. That's when I start getting involved. So we found them a rocket. They launched on a Falcon 9 rocket, SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. So part of my job is to make sure that I work with SpaceX. I'm working with this was a Goddard Flight Center out in Greenbelt, out in Maryland. So I'm working with the folks in Maryland who are building the satellite. I'm working with SpaceX out in California who are building the rocket and making sure that everyone's talking to one another, making sure that we all know what we need to do for day of launch. And by the way, I'm based in Florida. So those are very interesting phone calls where, why are you still working at 9 o'clock at night? I'm like, well, it's 6 o'clock in California. They work till like 7 or 8 o'clock. So you get kind of interesting shifts of your time when you have to work with people all over the world. I'm not saying that those three are all over the world, but we do work with folks all over the world. So anyway, that was a really fun mission. You can see we launched successfully. The artist rendition's up there at the top of what the spacecraft has looked like. And then you can see down in the bottom right, that's what the satellite looked like as we were processing it right before launch. So that's what a satellite looks like. I think this was a maybe $300 million satellite-ish. If you go back a slide, just one. My famous pose over there. Behind me is called the Psyche satellite. That was a $1.13 billion satellite. And they let me get that close to it. Suckers. But yeah, that was a set. So that satellite went to mine a asteroid. So like I said, we go to asteroids. We're going to just check out plankton. We'll go forward again.
Is that the satellite that brought back that canister of dust that they were very
That
careful
was
about how they
that was OSIRIS-REx. That launched back in 2016. So, but that did also go to an asteroid. We nudged it. Is what we did. We got down. We kissed it. We blew some smoke dust. We essentially had these thrusters that blew dust, and we had vacuums that sucked off the dust from the asteroid, and then we brought it all the way back to test it. So, yeah, but that was OSIRIS-REx. Good memory. So the other project that I'm currently working on right now, when I say right now, I'm working on like 5 different projects. This is just one of them. It's my next one up. It's called Europa Clipper. Europa Clipper is really cool because it is being built and designed out of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory at Pasadena, California. We're launching on a Falcon Heavy rocket, so SpaceX out in California, and we're launching from Florida. So we got all these people all over the country trying to coordinate schedules, and it's always a great time. So what Europa Clipper is getting ready to do is we're going to go to Jupiter. All right, so any guesses of how we get to Jupiter? Do we just launch straight from Earth?
No, we launch from Earth to the moon, use the gravity of the moon to send us flying, then we can take any other planet's orbit to launch us further as we need in order to get to Jupiter, and then we can take all the photos and samples we want.
You're going to be a future NASA employee then. That is awesome, that's awesome.
My brother wanted to.
Ah, that's a great answer. A little bit different than what we're doing. We do different orbiting bodies. So we're not going to the moon with this one. We're going to Mars. So we launch from Earth. We go to Mars. We slingshot around Mars, exactly why you said, to get a gravity assist boost. And then we come back to Earth. Why are we coming back to Earth? Because we're going to slingshot around Earth now. So we go to Mars, back to Earth, and now we go to Jupiter. And we're going to the moon of Jupiter called Europa. Europa is a very icy type of moon. And so what we're going to do is we're going to try to see if there's a life underneath the ice. Yes?
That's what I was going to say, to see if there's life on
That's exactly what we're going to try to do.
Liquid water.
100%. You two right here. Future.
We're brothers.
Ah, I see it now. I see it now. Both troublemakers now. But no, great. Yeah, we're to see if there's life. We're to see if there's life underneath all that ice on Europa. And so it's supposed to be I think it's going to be a 4 or 5 year mission. So let me put this in perspective when I talk about timelines. Europa Clipper, about 7 years to build to get to launch. It's going to take 6 years to get to Europa. Then once we're at Europa, it's taking 5 years worth of science where it's going to do about 50 revolutions or 50 orbits around the moon, getting closer and closer every time, and at its closest, it's going to get to 13 miles above the surface taking readings. So on one of my previous slides, I talked about I've worked 65 launch campaigns, I've worked 65 missions. That's because I kind of just come in at the very end, launch them, and then I'm like, see you later, we got you off the planet, good luck. A lot of the people who work these types of missions are putting in 7, 8 years just in design and build. And then they have to sit around for 6 years to get to the planet where they're going to. Then they have 5 years worth of data that they're collecting, and then they usually have 10 years after that of trying to analyze that data. So a lot of the people that we work with on the spacecraft team, they're our customer. I am here to make you happy. And it's because in their entire career, they may launch 2 missions their entire career. I've launched 65 in a little over a decade. They'll do 2 their entire lifetime. So it is important that we take everything we can to make sure that we get there on a very safe trajectory and a very safe plane. So the other really cool thing about Europa Clipper is, and I use these 2 missions for a very specific reason, pace. Pace could launch any day of the year. And it was on launch at 1:31 a.m. with 42 seconds. And I have that burned in my memory because we sat for a couple times at 1:31 with 42 seconds. We hate early morning launches. It is, everyone hates staying up all night. Europa Clipper, we have 25 days to get that off the planet. If we don't launch after 25 days, it's like a 17-month delay. So we have to wait for all the planets to align back to get to a safe,
I just have a real quick question.
Sure.
I understand when you're going to the ISS, the ISS has to be directly overhead to do the launch. But when you're doing something like PACE,
Yes.
why does it have to be down to the split second?
Great question. So, PACE specifically had temperature requirements, so we wanted to launch in the nighttime. So we wanted to make sure that as we came overhead, it was nighttime so that we wouldn't overheat the spacecraft. So we wanted to launch into the night shadow of Earth. So every single mission that we do will have mission-specific requirements of, I don't care where you put me at, I can go any time of the year. Other ones are just like, I have very sensitive equipment that I don't want exposed to certain elements of the sun or the moon or the heat or the heat or the cold, and we have to take that into consideration. So when we have our trajectory analysis people figure out how to get us into space or when to get us into space, they got to take all that stuff into account, and they can come up with our launch time. So, good question. Yes?
What happens to the Jupiter after 5 years that it floats around Jupiter? Does it burn up? Or?
I don't know. I don't think we're crashing it into the. I don't think we're crashing it into the surface. A lot of times, what we do is we will have enough leftover fuel within our system to put us into an escape orbit to send us off either toward the sun to get burned up toward the sun, or just out of our solar system where it's not going to hit anything. But I didn't look specifically to see what we're doing with Europa Clipper. Yes.
Are we ever gonna send any astronauts to have equipment that they could go into other galaxies and then go to the planets and see what they are, to see if they have any life or no?
That's the plan, but we're not quite there yet. So maybe in your lifetime, but I'll probably be long retired by then. So, but yeah, that is the plan. We want to explore other, with the Artemis program and the SLS rocket, we want to go back to the moon. We want to eventually take that step to go back to Mars. So we're using these as building blocks for deep space travel.
Yeah, but I'm thinking if Artemis works and we can go to Mars, we can probably go to Neptune or maybe Pluto, and then we can use Slingshot to throw spaceships over there or throw parts over there, and we assemble a bigger spaceship to throw. We take another spaceship that's smaller after it uses all of its thrust, then we can throw it out into or satellite into farther reaches that no fuel could get us.
Have you listened to any of the other speakers?
No, only the one at the Aerospace Dynamics Museum.
Was he the guy talking about rockets?
He's the one that's talking about like how to ascend
Yeah.
over a plane.
Yeah, he's a funny guy. Anyway, so I asked that question because what you just said right now is a lot of the different programs that we currently have at work at NASA. So a lot of what you just asked is stuff that we're thinking about long term. We have something called the Deep Space Logistics Module, which is a gateway program, which is going to take over for the International Space Station. We're going to have that set up into orbit the moon. So when SLS launches, they'll dock with that as a way to go deeper into space. All right, and then you said there's a couple other things that hit a couple different memories. That's the only one I remember off the top of my head. But no, we are thinking about things like that. So no, that was a great question. And we're on that path. It just takes money and time and engineering to get there. So I think the last thing I want to say about Europa Clipper, we have 25 days to get off the planet. If we don't get off the planet those 25 days, it's a lot of money to either sit back and say, do we want to sit around for 17 months? Oh, you said go to Pluto.
Yeah.
My mind goes everywhere. Pluto. Let's have a Pluto story. So we launched a mission called, does anyone know the mission that we launched that went to Pluto?
New Horizons.
New Horizons. Excellent. Excellent. So Pluto New Horizons launched off an Atlas V rocket, 551. It was the biggest rocket we had at the time. Pluto New Horizons was probably one of the smallest spacecraft we've ever launched. And we put it on the biggest rocket that we actually have. It was the fastest human-made object ever to leave the planet. Yes, I think it still is, or Psyche may have been the next one, may have taken that lead. But so Pluto New Horizons back in 2006 until maybe last year was the fastest human-made object to come off this planet. And we did that because we had to get all the way to Pluto. Pluto. Still a planet? Pluto still a planet? Yay? Good. We have a good crowd here.
It's dwarf/planet still. Dwarf planet or
No, it's a planet, son, trust me.
But
As
it's
old as I am,
mostly
it's a
called
planet.
dwarf planet.
It is
now.
called a dwarf planet, correct. But I'm focused on the word planet. So in order to get to Pluto New Horizons, we had a very short window to get there. I think we had about a 3-week window to launch. And every day we didn't launch off of, we had a launch date. If we launched on that date, it was 12 years to get there. If we launched one day later, it was 13 years to get there. We ended up launching 5 or 6 days later, and I think it added almost 4 years to the transition time to get to Pluto. Every day was years because every day Pluto was going to get further and further away from us. And we slingshot across a couple different planets. I think we even used Jupiter as a little bit of a gravity assist too. Even with doing all that, every day we didn't launch, it was years to get there. So again, something else that we have to worry about, something else that we have to think about going to deep space is, are we going to a planet? Are we just going to an area? Because every day that we wait, Earth is in a different position, that planet's in a different position, and do we now have to put more supplies? Because you now have to spend another year on this thing by spending one extra day on the ground on Earth. So sometimes things are not worth the time and money because of the way that the math works out. So we're always trying to find better ways to have more sustainable rocket engines in space to be able to, the proton engine's a really good one. Way that they'll consistently push us forward to speed us up in space so we won't have to use planets. So as technological advances happen in that realm, then maybe some of the things that you want to do or you were talking about will be more realistic. But at this time, we're kind of limited by what we currently have and what we currently can use. We'll go to the next slide.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to
Keep interrupting. You guys got me here for 34 more minutes.
I'm a big fan of Elon Musk and SpaceX.
Yes.
And I was reading where he announced that within 6 months, he expects to have perfected an engine that will travel at the speed of light.
I would not put it past him. I don't think he'll make 6 months, but I won't put him past it.
So if that actually should come to pass, if that thing becomes a reality, how long would it take if we launched today to get to Pluto?
So I'm an industrial engineer. I'm a rocket scientist. I don't do trajectory analysis.
Okay.
Quick answer to that question. Better answer to that question is, if we have a engine on a spacecraft that does that, I'm more curious about how much it's going to weigh and how much payload capacity will we currently have. So if the engine in the new technology is, so weight, everything that we launch into space deals with weight. The bigger you are, the bigger the rocket we need. So if this engine is the whole thing, then all we're really doing is launching an engine.
He said, if I remember properly, he said it will actually be smaller than the
Oh.
third generation that they're using on,
On the Falcon right now, or are you talking about a Saturn rocket?
no, I'm talking about the engines that they're using, the third generation engines that they're using for, what's the big one that they're doing the test flights on?
Are you talking about the Artemis, the SLS rocket,
No.
or?
Their rocket.
Oh, their rocket, the Starship rocket.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's about a third of the size of that engine.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, no, I had not heard him yet. I don't put anything past Elon Musk. When he says he wants to do something, they'll end up doing it. So, where I fall into this is, would we accept it on a government mission? And so that's usually when I start coming into play. Whether or not we accept it will probably eventually be a yes after lots of testing and lots of successful trials, and like you've proven that it's a reliable system that we can put a $1 billion spacecraft in where we can put humans on. Then we may use it down the road. So that will also, again, delay how long we could use it for what we want.
Because he's saying it would reduce the travel time for astronauts to be in a Starship to get to Mars from
I've-
6 months to 3 weeks.
Yeah. All right, let's see what my next slide is. Oh, love this slide. Industrial engineer, love processes. That's what I do. So to kind of give you an idea, a mission starts planning 10 years. Between 3.5 to 10 years is how long we start talking about a mission. These missions are anything from an idea of, hey, I want to go study the corona of the sun. So we had a mission, I kind of talked about it a little bit beforehand. We had a mission called Parker Solar Probe. Parker Solar Probe was a mission that we launched to the corona of the sun. The mission was named after a guy named Dr. Eugene Parker. Dr. Eugene Parker, when he was going through grad school to get his PhD, he wrote a paper in the 1960s about what happened within the corona of the sun. Back in the 1960s, I know no one here was alive in the 1960s. You guys are all pretty on the young side. No, you're not. I don't believe you at all. No,
I'm
not.
not reserved.
Okay. So he
I
wrote.
do it every year.
So Dr. Eugene Parker, for his PhD, wrote this paper about what happened inside the corona of the sun. In 2017, we launched a mission to prove his dissertation. It took us 50 years to develop the technology to allow us to send something to the sun that close to get the readings that he was predicting. So that kind of put you into perspective. That mission took probably, I want to say, around 7 or 8 years to build. But the idea and the concept of where that mission came from was 50 years before that.
Was it right?
I actually don't know. It currently is still in orbit around the sun taking readings. I haven't heard any big hooplas that it wasn't, so I'm gonna kind of assume it is. That goes back to me, once I'm off the planet, I kind of check in with you here and there, but I have 5 other missions that I need to get off the planet, and these folks are now just doing their science. So I'll check in with them every now and then, but that's the unfortunate part of my job is you either pick to do the science or you pick to do the rockets. I pick the rockets. So we have an idea, we build a spacecraft, we then select what kind of rocket we want to go on. You can kind of see some of the rockets, it's not the best picture. We select the rocket you want to go on. We start getting closer. I get involved in like the 18 to 3 month process. I start figuring out what you're doing, what you want to do, make sure you're communicating properly. Communication's huge. We start getting closer to launch. Next slide. What are we going to do for launch day? How do we talk to one another? Who's doing what on day of launch? What are you responsible for? What am I responsible for? Okay. So with NASA, we try to figure out ways to make things super, super simple so everyone involved knows what they're doing on day of launch. Go one more. And this is how NASA makes things super, super simple. All right. Is this not a simple? I think this is a very simple chart, right? There's arrows pointing which way things are going. So this is how we communicate on day of launch. This is what I have to take people and make them understand after you've built a really, really expensive spacecraft, how you're talking to one another. And so this is important because I want to highlight on the bottom right here, we have the Morale Operations Center. That's the Space Force. So not only on launch day do I have to worry about the spacecraft team and the health and status of their spacecraft, not only do I have to worry about a SpaceX or United Launch Alliance and the health and status of their launch vehicle, I have to talk to the Air Force, figure out, do we have anyone out there in the ocean? Do we have, what's the weather look like? They're in charge of the weather. So I'm dealing with them for weather, I'm dealing with them for population control, I'm dealing with them for just about everything else that the Space Force is responsible for. Collision avoidance, huge. They're responsible for that. Then you go all the way to the other side, and you have NOAA. This specific mission was a NOAA mission. So we partnered with NOAA, National Oceanography something Administration. They do all the weather stuff. So we had to partner with them. And so they had people all the way in the NSOF, which is up in the D.C. area. So I'm now dealing with people in Washington, D.C. I'm dealing with people in the Air Force. We have downrange offsets all over the world, making sure that they're up and operational, and everything has to line up 100% perfectly for us to launch. So now you've been sitting here, you got a team who is anxious to launch because they've been building this for 10 years almost sometimes. And now they have to sit here and wait for all this stuff to kind of happen and align perfectly. So when we don't launch on the first try, it's not because we don't know how to. It's because everything has to line up so perfectly just to launch. We'll go to the next one. And then we get to launch. And so this is we're looking at a live, well, it's not live view, but this was a live view at the time of a spacecraft being released from the rocket. So, and you can see, remember I was telling you before about why it launched at a certain time? So that right there, that maneuver right there, it's a very, very technical NASA maneuver. It's called a barbecue roll. Super, super technical. And all that is we want to keep the spacecraft rotating constantly so that we're evenly distributing the heat on that spacecraft and we're not damaging any of the one systems at one point in time. So go to the next one. I said I work for the NASA Launch Services Program. NASA Launch Services Program has been doing this for 25 years. We've launched 103 missions, and this is where we've been in the solar system. We've gone all over Earth. We've done a lot of cool stuff around Earth. We've gone to the moon. We've gone to Mars. We've gone to the sun. We've gone to Pluto. We've gone to all these different planets out there. So you can see while some of our programs focus on the International Space Station, we have some programs that focus on just going to the moon. We go everywhere. And we'll keep going. We're still going to more places. I said I have 5 different projects that I'm working on right now. Our program is currently working on 70 different future missions that are launching between now and the mid-2030s. And we constantly have more being added and added and added. So missions are on this page right here. Some of them aren't going to launch for 5 or 6 years, but we're already still working those right now. So Mars sample return is a really cool one. You see Europa Clipper's already up there. Da Vinci's going to Neptune, I believe. So Mars sample return. Mars sample return is going to do kind of what OSIRIS-REx did. We're going all the way to Mars, we're taking a sample, and we're bringing it all the way back. So we have yet to do that. All the stuff that we've done on Mars, we have not brought a sample back.
Do you think they'll be able to, there was a thing about the Mars rover the other night on YouTube where it's collected more tubes of soil and different things. Do you think we'll ever be able to retrieve those and actually bring those physically back here?
Mars sample return. That's part of what it's doing. This part of it's a 2-part mission. The first part of the mission is going to go to collect data samples, and the second part is going to be bringing it all the way back. So we're going to try to figure out a way to get as much of that physical data or physical evidence, for lack of a better word, back to us. So I don't know how they're doing that yet. That mission is so far off my radar. I have like 4 missions before that one even starts coming into what I start learning about it, but I do know that much about it.
Is that part of your job? Part of just bringing it back or just sending them out?
Send them out.
So there's a department that brings them back?
So the people who build a
Another
space,
department?
yeah. So the people who build a spacecraft, that's part of their entire mission flow. So they'll have a list of requirements of, hey, it must do X, Y, and Z. And for Mars sample return, that last one is bring it back. So the engineers who are building the actual spacecraft itself have a mechanism to bring it all the way back.
I guess what I was thinking of, that you're coordinating like where they would land or that kind of stuff. Like they don't just drop it in my backyard. They
No.
have like a special place to put it.
So-
I know you coordinate it.
So no, I don't coordinate that, but so within our program we have flight analysts, we have structure engineers, fluid engineers. So our flight analysts will be working with the team at JPL to decide that.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so not this guy, but people within our program do help with that.
Another department.
Yes, yes. So, next slide. So I was told to come talk about the eclipse. Oh, this is probably not the slide to be recording on, by the way, because I was all like, okay, I'll put together an eclipse slide. Here's my eclipse slide. NASA did not like that this was my eclipse slide. They're like, we have to do something way better. This is not going to get the point across. I'm like, solar eclipse, lunar eclipse, I feel like it tells you the order of where everything's supposed to be. I think this is a great slide to help educate people. They're like, no, 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 this is not technical enough, not technical enough. Next slide. This is what they want me to present about the eclipse. I'm like, okay, I guess I can do this. So the big takeaway here is, the biggest takeaway here I'm going to say is, do not look at the sun. Do not look at the sun unless you're wearing solar eclipse glasses. If you don't have solar eclipse glasses, get some solar eclipse glasses. So before we have the total solar eclipse, we're going to have the partial solar eclipse. We'll have another partial eclipse on this end. During that time frame, please, if you're going to look at the sun, wear solar eclipse glasses. Do not look direct. If you guys take nothing else from this, do not look at the sun with your eyes. All right? Your moms are very, very smart when they told you don't look. I'm looking at you here, troublemaker. Do not look at the sun with your bare eyes. But when we have the total solar eclipse, you can look at them with your bare eyes. Hopefully we'll have a nice clear sunny day that day, and you'll be able to see these wisps right around the sun. That's the corona of the sun, which is where Parker Solar Probe is currently at right now. So it's kind of a bring it all back together. And then some technical words, some cool little videos that NASA wanted to. I think my animation was way better, by the way. We'll go to the next slide, please. You have a question? Okay, that's all right. If you do, you can say something. So here's the path of totality that we're gonna get across. Niagara Falls, was it 3:18 p.m. on Monday? 3:18 p.m. I get some head nods. Okay. So path of totality. So that's when you can take off your solar eclipse glasses you're gonna be wearing from now until Tuesday. You know what? Your brother looks like he's like the responsible one.
Are you going to be here for it?
I'm going to be here for it, yes. So we got a couple more engagements, we got a couple more speaking events, but we're here for the entire shebang. So we have actually, NASA has I think 6 or 7 different sites, all on the path of totality. From I think we have a team out in Mexico. We have a couple in Texas and going all the way up. For some reason, they thought it was really, really funny to put all the Florida people in Niagara Falls. So you're looking at my cold weather gear right there. This long sleeve shirt, that sweater, and I have one other sweater. By the way, I had washed these in my closet 2 months ago because winter was over in Florida 2 months ago. I had to I was like, I don't have clothes. It's gonna be 30 degrees. There's snow. There's that icon for snow on your phone. I don't know what that was. I was like, oh man, I don't know what I got myself into. So, yes.
And here the question is, explorer friends from Russia, explorer said me, according with that the radiation coming from the sun,
Yeah.
we detected in orbits coming and going to the core,
Okay.
to our nucleus and our nucleus span energy.
Interesting.
We received that. I don't know, they are 25, 30 years explorer. I have the photos, actually.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. Yeah.
Later.
That sounds very interesting.
Sorry.
No, that's good. Thank you. So we do have the path of totality going all the way over here. We'll go to the next slide. If I haven't stomped this far enough, solar eclipse glasses. I can't. This is the one side that would not let me remove from the presentation. Do not look at the sun. Do not look at the sun without solar eclipse glasses. There are also different ways to view the solar eclipse. Have you tried with the cereal box poking the holes? Have you ever done that?
No.
Your brother probably has.
They were all done
No.
in 2017.
Okay.
He did.
We'll be there. We'll be doing all the
Okay. So if you don't have solar eclipse glasses, which I do have extra, please take some. You can definitely do that. I've never. See, I know you want some of these. Yeah.
You
So,
can look at that.
troublemaker, right there. I knew it. All right. Next slide. So on top of the solar eclipse, we have Parker Solar Probe doing some really cool, fun things. We also have a couple different missions. NASA's doing a couple different science missions during the solar eclipse. One of the things that we're doing is we're launching 3 sounding rockets. A sounding rocket is just a very small rocket. Well, small in relative forms. It's probably about, from you to you, that's probably about the size of a sounding rocket. We're launching 3 of these. The first one's going to be launched from White Sands, New Mexico, 15 minutes before the solar eclipse. The next one is going to be launched from Wallops Island, Virginia. What's up?
I thought it was 35 minutes before.
35? It could be.
That's what what I heard.
You have all the answers. I'm just making stuff up over here.
That's what I heard from the last presentation. That's all I'm gonna say.
Oh, if you heard it from someone else, they're wrong. All right. If you had read it on the internet, I'd be like, you're probably right. So, yeah.
Just no one from your.
This is what it's like working for the federal government. You're welcome. No, I read 15 minutes, but if someone else said it was 35 minutes, then maybe they're responsible and they understand what is going on, and I will defer to them. 35 minutes sounds fine. I'm not launching it. If I was launching it, I would be able to tell you the exact second between launches.
So that he was the logistics guy, he's the launch guy.
Oh, the logistics person? Absolutely not. We're trusting mine. It's 15 minutes, okay? We can cut that part out of the video as well, too, so it doesn't totally get me in trouble. So 15 minutes before the solar eclipse, during the solar eclipse, 15 minutes after. We're also doing a listening party for the amateur radios. Anyone who does like ham radios, there'll be a bunch of amateur radio people all over the world seeing what the disturbance of the solar eclipse does to their radio frequencies and radio transmissions. So they're in a kind of chat party. We're also taking a bunch of pictures and taking some other readings. Honestly, I don't know a whole lot about this slide. They made me put this in there, so I can only talk about it so much. If the words don't give you enough information, the little QR code, have at it. Let me know whether it's 35 minutes or 15 minutes. Next slide. Was there a question on that one? Because that's like my worst slide ever. I don't know what any of this stuff is. So heliophysics. Heliophysics is a big year for heliophysics. Obviously, we have the solar eclipse coming up on Monday. Late last year, they had a annual eclipse, and there's Parker Solar Probe on its making its closest approach to the sun. Now, I think they cheated a little bit when they say, oh, Parker Solar Probe is making its closest solar approach to the sun. It orbits the sun, and every time it orbits the sun, it gets closer and closer and closer. So every time it goes by the sun, it's the closest it's ever been. But it's making its next approach at the end of 2024. And so that heat shield that you can see in front of the instruments right there, that's what took 50 years to develop. So on one side of that heat shield, it's a couple thousand degrees. On the other side, it is about 75, 80 degrees. And yeah, that's how much protection that has to protect all the instruments on the back there. Those two little like antennas kind of shooting out, that brings all the information all the way back to us. So that's my last slide. So yes,
I don't know if this is a pertinent question,
it
but,
always is.
but you hear a lot about space junk.
Yes.
So does space junk interfere with your launching?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So space junk, also known as collision avoidance, is what we call it in like the technical world. So collision avoidance is something that we deal with every single launch. So not only does the weather, not only does the launch vehicle have everything has to be worth, our trajectory of where we're launching from, we work with the Space Force and they have a catalog of every single piece of space debris out there. And we tell them where our trajectory is flying through. And because everything has a predictable orbit, we know where that space debris is currently at and where it's going to be at when we launch. And so we have something called a missed distance criteria. So it's about 100 nautical miles. So if we're going to fly within 100 nautical miles of one piece of debris, we can't launch. So we have to be outside of that 100. If we're launching Artemis that has people on board, it has to be 200 nautical miles outside of a little piece of debris. So that plays a huge role in our launch availability.
How big of a piece of debris do you have to avoid?
A couple inches. So they track it.
So like a bolt?
A bolt would be something we track. Yes.
Do you think to fix the junk problem, why don't you just send out a spacecraft with an arm to grab all the junk?
Let me tell you about that. If I knew how to do that, I would not be working for NASA. If there's any young people who want to make billions of dollars in the future, find a way to clean up space debris.
Or you could just have like a giant magnet on front.
Giant magnet, I've heard nets, I've heard all sorts of things. If you want to make billions of dollars in the future, find a way to clean up space junk. That is one of the people will give you money for it. And if you can clear up everything up there, you're going to make billions of dollars doing
Yeah,
it.
and then you could also turn that space junk into like refined stuff, and then you could make it to build more spaceships to get rid
You
of
can
the
do it,
junk.
hence
And
$1
sell it.
billion dollar idea. I'll come work for you when you figure it out. Did you have a question over there too?
No, I'm just making a big
Oh.
space garbage.
It's gonna launch a garbage truck.
Launch a garbage truck. All ideas are welcome. Did someone else? Oh.
So you said you don't do manned
I do not do crewed missions anymore.
So
Correct.
is that still your department, or just another
So,
launch operation?
no, so that's great. So NASA has a lot of different programs. So one of the programs is, where do I work? For what program? Launch, someone's there? Launch Services Program. You guys all failed the quiz, by the way. So one of the programs NASA has, Launch Services Program. Another program NASA has, Commercial Crew Program. Another one we have is the Artemis Program. Another one we have is Crew Resupply Missions. So these are all different programs that NASA has, and we all have different, like, essentially we have different edicts of what we need to do. We all work together. So I work with the International Space Station program, I work with the Commercial Crew program, and I work with the Artemis program, because I am one of those focal points for, essentially it's an air traffic controller for outer space, where I need to make sure that if the Commercial Crew program wants to send a crew capsule to the International Space Station, and they only have a certain amount of docking ports in the International Space Station, and they need to launch another mission, well, if the port's not available, you can't launch. This is why it's important to me. If you can't launch and you stay on the pad at Florida, and mine's the very next mission, I have to wait for a crew capsule to undock from the International Space Station. I have to wait for it to come all the way back down to Earth. I have to wait for this one to launch, and then I can come in. And so that's where all the backups happen. And so for a mission like PACE, where I can launch 365 days of the year at 1:31 in the morning with 42 seconds, not a big deal. But if that launch pad being used is for my mission like Europa Clipper, where I have 25 days to get off the planet, we have an issue. So we all work with one another about our manifest to make sure that we're not clogging up the system. So even though I don't work with the humans in space, I coordinate a lot of the launch campaigns, a lot of the launch, their launch time frames of when they want to launch things.
And aren't there multiple launch complexes in Florida that you can, if you tied up with, say, an ISS, a crewed mission going to ISS, but it can't go because there's one there that hasn't left yet. Why can't you use another launch complex to launch one of yours?
Great question. So right now, the only launch pad that we have that is capable of launching humans is 39 Alpha. 39 Alpha is where we launch all our Falcon Heavy rockets and all the crewed Dragon capsules for SpaceX. So if I have a crewed Dragon capsule on 39A that's waiting for a capsule to be undocked from the International Space Station, that's the only pad that can physically take the beating of a Falcon Heavy rocket. I can't take that rocket. Short answer is every pad is designed for a specific rocket. So 39 Bravo is the Artemis rocket. 40 Complex 40 is the Atlas V rocket. So one rocket, one pad.
But if you've got a rocket that is smaller than, say, an Artemis that has to go, and you've got 39 Alpha tied up, why can't you use Bravo for a lighter weight rocket?
So when I say it's configured in a certain space, configured from the commodities that are used on that launch pad to how everything is run to where you sit your mobile launcher platform on top of. I mean, we're talking about the guts of the launch pad have to line up within millimeters of where your rocket has to go. So they're not interchangeable. That is something that I think Elon and a lot of these private companies are trying to do, is try to make something more user-friendly. Like you go to an airport, you park your airport next to the terminal, and if you've ever looked down, you'll see 737, 757, 767. So that tells the people guiding your airplane in where to stop your aircraft, so where that terminal gate comes out can meet with your plane. So every single terminal in all these different airports are interchangeable with all the different types of aircraft. We don't have that in the launch vehicle world. We don't have that in the rocket world yet. But again, like if we talk about space debris, if you can find a way to have your design standards for all the different rockets be the same, you can now start using those types of launch pads interchangeably.
Get on it, kid.
Get on it. It'll come work for you too. Do we have a question over here? Yes.
So the folks that work on the science side, this is like their life's work.
Yes.
So what does retirement look like? Do they roll people out of there, or does NASA say you've got to retire?
Or you can't retire projects.
So both answers are correct. Sometimes the pull of retirement, I feel like you're retired, maybe. The pull of retirement overweighs the loyalty you have to a project sometimes. All right, I want to go sit on a beach in Mexico. That's great that you guys want to spend 4 more years designing a bolt. See you later. some people are like that. I'm not saying everyone is. A lot of people that I have met are very dedicated to what their projects are. So a lot of them will delay retirement until they launch, or until they get a certain point in their design process where they can retire. A huge thing that we're going through with NASA right now is our age generational gap. We have a lot of people in our mid-50s. I'll get to you really quick right after I finish this. We have a lot of people like in our mid-50s and above who are getting ready to retire in the next 5 or 10 years. And we have a couple folks in their early 20s, but we have a very small mid-career in their 40s. They've all gone elsewhere. So when this huge generation retires in their 50s, we don't have enough people mid-career to take over that responsibility and that have that legacy, to have that legacy knowledge, tribal knowledge, what they call it, to help teach all the younger folks coming along. So we are definitely, that's one of the things that NASA is actively trying to do, make sure we hire the right people so that when all that knowledge retires, we've found a way to capture it. Do you have a question over there? Yes. Oh, what? Love it. I love it.
Yeah, we're laughing, and these ideas will be in 50 years.
Yeah, they will. I guarantee I'll be sitting on the beach somewhere retired being like, vacuum cleaners on a rocket. She's a billionaire right now. I like it. That's a good, yeah. I'll send someone an email. I like it. Yes.
You mentioned that you get data from SpaceX, so it just reminds me like how science used to be, where this open information, people shared it, wasn't like patents and proprietary. Is that like Spaces?
No, it's all proprietary. It's all proprietary. So now two different things. That's two different question answer. I have so much information on SpaceX, United Launch Alliance, because I work with all those launch vehicles. And I have to be very careful because when I work one mission with United Launch Alliance and I have to go flip over the next meeting 30 minutes later to talk SpaceX, I can't be saying something about United Launch Alliance in a SpaceX meeting. There are huge company proprietary issues that go back left and forward. Now, when we talk about the science coming down from a mission, that science is federally funded and is open to everybody. So everything, all the information that we get from all our different missions is, if you want to make a public request for information and you have like the 15 pens it takes to like fill out all the information, it's yours. But we offer that to academia, we offer it to researchers. Everyone who wants to take that data and analyze it, it's yours for free. We just give you a data dump of it.
So,
Sorry.
I remember from the very beginning, I was born 2 weeks after Sputnik 1 went up. So
Okay.
I followed everything. But I have heard, and I don't know if it's true, but after the Apollo missions were done, basically the science behind it was lost because everybody had gone away. So it took 50 years for them to be able to figure out how to get there again with Artemis. Is that true?
No, it's not. It's what I think is a half-truth is that we lost a lot of that tribal knowledge of how certain things had to be accomplished because they weren't the best at writing down specific steps of how to do X, Y, and Z. But by the time we got to Artemis, the rockets were so different, and we know how to go to the moon. That's never been an issue. They figured it out in the 1960s. Our program definitely took it up. We've been to the moon multiple times since the Saturn program has retired.
I'm talking about manned missions.
But the trajectory of how to get there is all the same. So all they're trying to do is figure out how to take really, really complex things now with their capsules and get them to the moon, not so much of the trajectory, but of how to fit everything in there. And so, the biggest thing back in the day was that you have more processing power in your cell phone than the entire Saturn V rocket did back in the day. So it's not so much of trying to relearn things, you're trying to now deal with new technology to put it into a capsule and how we're gonna make everything work. Do we want to have LCD screens? Do we want to have people, recline back on launch? It's more of those things that are trying to figure out how to make things more advanced than what we had back in the Saturn V days. So, I think you had a question.
Actually, you were talking before kind of like coordination of all the launch pads and stuff. Does that work on an international level as well?
Yes.
Or does every country kind of do their own thing now?
No, it works international. So obviously the Russians go to the International Space Station. So we have the different docks that are on the the different docks on the International Space Station receive different types of capsules. So we can move capsules around on the International Space Station if needed. but you have like the Soyuz ones for the Russians. So if the Soyuz needs to remove one of their or they have an issue they can't go down, they would affect our launch rate as well, or our ability to dock at the International Space Station. So.
People shoot rockets up, they're all coordinated kind of?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because I just thought I heard something about Korea sending something up or something.
Okay, so
Kind of out of, like they weren't supposed to do it.
so people do that. They're not supposed to. Bad on them. But we try to, as an international community, we try not to let the greater politics kind of mess with you. Like because we're all trying to do the same thing. We're all trying to make sure that we put things in space safely. We get our science back. We keep our astronauts or our cosmonauts safe. So, in a general speaking, we're all trying to coordinate with one another on those grand schemes. So, if someone wants to do something that's a little bit on the questionable side and they want to stir up a political debate, NASA just does one of these. Like, okay, that's not my bag. Anybody had any other questions? So the Eclipse classes, if you guys need anything, I'll be up here if you guys have any other questions, want to talk about anything. Yes?
So, I thought of another way to clean up junk. Instead of using.
I'm on board the vacuum idea right now, so it's got to be better than the vacuum idea.
What if it's like on just our normal rockets we're just sending out, instead of just sending out specific rockets to do it, why not on every rocket we do have like little do you know the Canada arm on the, like we could use that, maybe make it its own module and then have it like be able to detach. There's a piece of junk in our way, have it detach, go over, grab it, come back, put it into some storage unit or something. Then all the spaceships we need can launch. If there's another piece of junk,
I like it.
back out, grabs it.
That could work too. Yeah, these are all great. You have a lot of good ideas. So I'm not gonna lie, that's good. You guys are gonna be well taken care of when he's a billionaire. Yeah.
Alright, so I'm thinking that we have a rocket ship that has, instead of being like Canada arms or a big vacuum cleaner on top, what if we have it like in the middle of space, like the top come off and then there's like a swarm of like moving vacuums.
That could
And then it
work
goes
too.
through and then it
So I'm gonna give you guys, I'm gonna like crush your souls just a little bit. Hopefully not enough. Everything you have to take up there is weight. All right. So if you have something that's not part of your primary mission, now you may be paying more money for a rocket to lift that extra weight up there. So be thinking about that. So if you have magnets are heavy. Are magnets gonna mess with the
like most, they would probably be like this big.
So if you're going to pick up those space capsule, I think you need a little bit.
little more? So, but I like where you're going. I just want to give you something to think about along those lines.
Maybe you can use the magnet to power.
We're gonna go talk to the astronaut next.
Oh, go tell him all this stuff. Go
He's
tell
gonna
him.
he's gonna be reaching out to you.
Thank you very much.